All right, we're going to go live.
All right.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very exciting new series, the Neighborhood series. I'm so excited to deep dive into one of my favorite regions in the world, the Russian River Valley. This is not only a beloved region in California, but worldwide. And I'm so excited to be joined here today by two experts in the region that we're talking about, but also in the neighborhood that we're going to be talking about, which is Eastern Hills. So to sort of get us set up for what we're about to talk about today, we're going to be focusing on a new concept to me, something I didn't even know existed until recently when the Russian River Valley Wine Growers Association, my partner in this endeavor, reached out to me and said, we think this would be really cool to talk about. So what do you say? So we sort of set up this whole 6-part series, and each week we're going to be breaking down each of these different neighborhoods. And again, we'll get into that in a little bit. But let me introduce to you my guests. I have Greg LaFollette from Ancient Oak Cellars. Hello, Greg.
Hi, Amanda.
Where are you joining us from?
I'm joining us from the Siebert Ranch, historic Eastern Hills vineyard owned by Ken and Melissa Siebert.
Wonderful. And Mike Brunson joining us from Christopher Creek. Where are you joining us from?
I'm joining from my backyard actually today, which is just north of Healdsburg in Cloverdale, California.
Well, that's lucky. The weather looks beautiful there. I wasn't sure if it was going to cooperate for us. I will be sharing my screen for a little bit of this, just to give you guys a little bit of context as far as where we are in the world. So let's start with the very wide picture of what is happening and where we're located. So 1 second, let's share my screen and take you to, did I do it? Is it Sharon? You never really know. There we go.
Hey.
Perfect. Yeah, we can share screen. So we'll start in the United States of America. That's where we are. Very broad picture. I thought that would be helpful because I know a lot of people are not in the United States. A lot of people join us from all over the world. So United States of America, we are going to be over on the left-hand side there in California. This is us. So we're in Northern California talking about Sonoma and Russian River Valley. I think I kind of got that arrow right. So that's where we are in the world. We're going to dial it in a little bit into California more specifically. So kind of where I'm circling around up here in this little orange area, that's where we're going to be focusing on today, specifically in Sonoma. I'll zoom in so you guys can see a little bit. You see Sonoma there, and then right next door to Sonoma is where I live in the Napa Valley. So that gives you a little bit of context for where we are. And then as we dive in even further, this is the Russian River Valley. So you guys saw Sonoma, that little sliver on the side there, just by the Pacific Ocean next to Napa Valley with a mountain range in between. This is Sonoma, and this blue area, except for that dark blue area here, this blue area here is the Russian River Valley. And this is the neighborhood. So as we go back and forth between neighborhoods week to week, or I guess just forward, not going back and forth, we're going to be focusing on this region uphill in the up here in the corner here, the Eastern Hills, and that's where we're going to be landing today. So let me back up a little bit and stop sharing my screen to have a little conversation with you guys. 1 second. And let's talk about the Russian River Valley. Thoughts, feelings, opinions. Greg, you've been doing this for a while. What's your thoughts on the Russian River Valley as a region?
Well, I've made wine all over the planet, and I somehow keep returning to right here. I've raised 6 kids in the Sebastopol Hills, but I make wine from virtually every one of the neighborhoods. And with Ancient Oak, this is our home for Ancient Oak Vineyards with Ken and Melissa Siebert. Ken's grandfather planted this vineyard. They've raised their children here. So at this site that you're looking at here in the background, you're looking at a 4-generation swath of grape growing activity. And the property's been owned much longer than that by the Siebert family.
And what's your sort of earliest memory of Russian River Valley wine? Do you remember like the first bottle you ever had?
Well, yeah, it actually was kind of a famous wine. It was made from Bacigalupe grapes, or 60% was from Bacigalupe grape.
Yeah,
and
we're gonna be talking to them later on.
Yeah, it's it won the Judgment of Paris. So I was lucky enough to have that wine and several times. And I guess that goes back about as far as Sonoma County Chardonnay goes.
That's a pretty good memory. And for those who are kind of confused about the Bacigalupi reference, there was a significant portion of Bacigalupi Chardonnay in the Chateau Montelena Chardonnay. I think that's what you're referencing, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So for the Judgment of Paris, Mike, talk to me about Russian River Valley. Thoughts, feelings, favorite things about the place?
Yeah, I mean, what can you say? It's a beautiful space. You know, kind of like an English muffin with all the nooks and crannies and all the little, you know, bits and little turnoffs and hills and oh, I didn't know you had a vineyard. You know, that sort of thing. You're just constantly surprised that there's another, you know, really unique spot in the Russian River Valley. So from a winemaker's standpoint, it's always really cool because you get to find new things, and there's always a new something, a new challenge, a new spot, a new take on something that, you know, I've been doing since 1989. And yeah, I mean, it's a pretty special spot, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's all about the fog in Russian River, right? I mean, we sort of delineate this area as the fog, which, you know, comes in from the Pacific and then moves out, you know, towards the morning. But really what is separating these neighborhoods is all the things that happen underneath of there. So the soil, the different elevations, and then the heat index, which is what we're going to be diving into. But just to the Russian River Valley, if you don't know it and you're watching this and you're like, what are you talking about? This is probably a little too specific for your taste today. So I'm going to ask you to back up and go do a little research on Russian River. I'll give you the fun facts, the Cliffs Notes of it. So 1970 is really sort of the start for when Pinot Noir started to be planted by icons like Joe Riccioli and Joseph Swan and Tom Dellinger. Those are the guys that started doing it. And I think, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, because this is why you're here. This notion of neighborhoods is not a new one, even though it's fairly recent in the academic approach to sort of sussing out what the differences are wine to wine. But this is something that I think has sort of been understood among winemakers and wine growers for quite some time now.
Yeah. We have a group of winemakers have been tasting wine together from these loosely held neighborhoods. I started tasting in depth with folks like Mary Edwards and the Rod father, Rod Berglund from Swan, as early as 1994. And we did one really big tasting in the mid to late 90s that kind of laid the groundwork for right now. But it wasn't until fairly recently that UC Davis has gotten involved to really definitively explain the differences among these different neighborhoods.
Yeah, same sort of thing. I mean, we, you know, back in the late 80s, I worked for a guy named Bruce Cass, just a phenomenal taster. Actually, he was a great palate, but he was telling me, and I was 19 years old at the time, oh yeah, wait till you really get into this. You're going to start to recognize these spots and these lines of consistency through these wines, even though, you know, just across the street, it's a little bit different. And obviously some of those are technique, but he said, but a lot of it is just how different these little spots are. So yeah, it's neat to have a little neighborhood thing going on here, that they're starting to clarify what we've sort of long believed, you know, oh, we can taste it sort of thing. But yeah, it's pretty cool to have that little pat on the back.
Yeah, it is really cool. And I think what was most interesting for me in my research is it's actually less anecdotal than I had initially thought. You know, I think some people think of these neighborhoods and the notion of terroir, I think to some degree as, you know, does it exist? Is it real? But the academics that went into this, the experiment side of things, this is where it gets really interesting, because it really started with just an initial tasting of 30 tasters who sat down with different wines from all across Russian River Valley, neighborhood to neighborhood, as they sort of thought. And by the way, these neighborhoods are not new constructs. They actually date back all the way to Santa Rosa Plains appears on maps back to the 1800s. So these are not new constructs. These are not like things that people just sort of like pulled out of the air. But this experiment initially happened. And if you guys have any insight, I'd love to hear a little bit. With 30 tasters, but the results were inconclusive. You got multiple different variables with different tasters. You know, a really hard thing to figure out from a hypothesis to explanation standpoint. So it was, what I found really fascinating was this this experiment sort of evolved by way of Dr. Roger Bolton from UC Davis. And he took all of these samples and said, we're actually going to throw this through more lab testing. And what came out of that were conclusive results that there is a distinction neighborhood to neighborhood that you can identify by way of chemical and lab analysis. So this is real. This is not just something that we pulled out of thin air, but I don't know if either of you have anything to add in that way, but I just thought that was so fascinating. And if anyone's interested, as long as Russian River Valley Wine Growers is okay with it, I'm sure they are, I will link to that paper because there's a whole study on what happened and what the process was.
Yeah, Roger did some really groundbreaking elemental analysis, and the results are pretty irrefutable. It's kind of like having a birth certificate. You know, it's no longer anecdotal. You can say, well, was he born in the United States or was he born out of the United States? And you just hold up your birth certificate and say, yes, I was born in the United States. That's how irrevocable this research has been done. And Roger Bolton, who's been doing research now for decades, said this was the most definitive and perhaps unexpected work that he's ever been involved with. He's never seen statistical groupings like this as strong and as tightly as these are for the different neighborhoods. So what this did was it simply validated a whole bunch of palates, not just all of us winemakers, but wine lovers, sommeliers, masters of wine all over the world who have held these beliefs are now saying, yes, our tasting actually counts for something because we can show it on this blueprint that these groupings really do exist in the different neighborhoods.
AKA, it's legitimate.
It is. And I think for me as a sommelier, we are always taught to look for terroir in a glass, but so much of what that means and how you find it and whether it's real and where it comes from is anecdotal. And I think for the first time, just in reading this analysis, it was the first time someone had put on paper, okay, categorically and without question, terroir exists, and it exists in this particular region for these particular reasons. And that is so exciting to me because I think going to the project, it was a little like, how are we going to taste through what's in the glass and figure out where the delineations lie. So with that in mind, let's talk about the Eastern Hills neighborhood. That's what we're here to do today. Now that we sort of set everybody up for the rest of the series. Following along the western edge of the Maya Comets Range, this is the northernmost neighborhood and has the least amount of fog influence. I assume that's true, right?
Yeah, I mean, I try not paint things so, like that, because I think I've noticed in the last few years, there's a lot less fog everywhere. But yeah, for sure. If you're comparing us to the other neighborhoods, for sure, it gets pretty darn warm. Christopher Creek, especially up on that nub, we lose our fog early, and it doesn't really settle in as early as it does in some of the other areas, which I think is just as important. It comes in late and leaves early. So,
and to your point, I mean, go ahead, Greg. Sorry.
Yeah, and the Siebert Ranch is at the southernmost end of this northernmost region, and we're probably a little bit cooler. So you're tackling probably the most complex neighborhood first in this series. We are the warmest area, and we do have the most diverse soil types because there's a wide range of different volcanic, sedimentary, and metamorphic based soils. It's less uniform than probably anywhere else in the Russian River Valley. So you're tackling the big challenge head on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so even within these neighborhoods, to your point, Greg and Mike, I think we're not dealing with a neighborhood that is uniform all the way across, and I don't think we'll be dealing with that in any way. And I think it's important to recognize as we go through this that there is no, this is where it ends, this is where it begins. The lines are very blurred. There's going to be exceptions to all the rules, but without fail, there is a fingerprint, a distinct fingerprint to all of these regions. Talk to me about being a winemaker in this region. What does it feel like? What does it look like from a growing aspect, and then also from a tasting aspect? Mike, I don't know if you want to begin.
Sure. I mean, I manage in the Eastern Hills. I manage 12 acres, 3 different varietals: Petite Syrah, Syrah, and Pinot Noir. That right there should tell you that it's a little bit warmer than some of the other areas. From a growing standpoint, these are old vines, and they were planted in some really nice spots. So they do really well, sort of on their own. We take a really soft approach. We're not, we're organically farming, but I would say, compared to some of the places I've worked before, being up on that bluff and getting a lot of the western sort of afternoon sun, it's really dependable, that I know that what I'm working with, it's right straight ahead. The sun is pointing right at us when there isn't fog, and that consistency and that dependability is really nice to have as a farmer, because that you do have to protect those grapes from the afternoon sun, especially as it gets close to harvest.
And how is that translating into the glass, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think this is my 10th year at Christopher Creek, and I think I'm really just sort of starting to get a firm handle on it, as far as harvest dates and challenges of each harvest are always going to be there. But I'm starting to feel a little bit more comfortable with how things are reacting out there. Like I mentioned, they're old vines, and those old vines make great wines, as long as we don't kick the legs out from underneath them. But from a winemaking perspective, I think it showcases itself, without a lot of input from us. I mean, we don't use and inoculate with cultivated yeasts or any of that sort of stuff. So I think we're getting a pretty true picture of what is coming in from out there. In talking to neighbors, I get a lot of the same feeling from people like John Visley, or the guys down at Limerick Lane and places like that. So, yeah.
Greg, farming, making wine. I mean, I know you're more on the winemaking side, but I know these places. How do you deal with it?
Well, it's actually a blessing. We tend to, this place tends to be picked first. Of all the vineyards that I work with, this is the first to come in terms of Pinot Noir. And so that does give us a lot of consistency. I think when you go to further west, where it's cooler, you are more affected by temperature swings and by rain and things like that. And so here in the Eastern Hills, it's a little bit more even and dependable, as Mike had said. It's actually a real joy to work with these. And as he also said, old vines make a difference.
Yeah.
Well, less talking, more drinking, I think. And we should start with rosé. Greg, you were very, we're only talking about Pinot Noir in this series. And I think it should be noted, not that we don't love Chardonnay, but we know Pinot Noir as being a grape that really expresses its terroir. It's a grape that is incredibly finicky. So I think Pinot was the obvious choice. And then also, I think for the experiment, it was all Pinot used for that as well, correct?
Yeah.
So you were very insistent that we not only drink red Pinot Noir, but also pink Pinot Noir. So, because you thought it expressed itself a little bit differently. So why I'm going to pour this in my glass. Why is that?
Well, for starters, these are from old vines, and unfortunately, the Tubbs fire destroyed this home ranch of Ken and Melissa's. But in 2018, even irrigated or sprayed or anything, and we actually saw that some of the vines were still alive and producing Pinot, and so it was kind of like an Easter egg hunt. We went and found a bunch of different grapes, and to make a wine like this, the very last of these old vines that were planted by Ken's grandfather is actually what every winemaker really wants to work with. It's got a unique place, a sense of history, and we did pick it on the early side, and it made a beautiful rosé, much better in acidity and structure and backbone than you would normally find from a California rosé. And to me, this is one of the reasons why I make wine, is the character of this wine and how it expresses itself in such a unique way. We may never see this again from this vineyard because it's now all replanted to new vines.
It is screaming high in acidity in a great way. I think sometimes we think of acid in a sort of pejorative way, but incredible acidity, but also incredible texture. Is this a result of, this sort of more evenness, but also, maybe slightly elevated heat?
Yes, all of the above. It's old vines, eastern hills. It's a west-facing slope, so it gets the afternoon sun. It tends to ripen earlier, but we picked even earlier, and it really did give us a lot of consistency and evenness. And you can feel in the structure and weight in this, even though it's a rosé, it's really giving a lot to this particular vineyard in this particular place, is giving it this sense of presence and place. It's not just your grandfather's rosé of Pinot, but it was planted by Ken's grandfather.
I love that. No, it's not. This is definitely this is a big rosé, and a big rosé that has a lot of delicate notions. And we don't want to dive too much into the winemaking side of things, but on the winemaking side of things, how do you make a wine like this while still allowing the terroir and the Eastern Hills to shine through?
You don't do anything to it. No yeast additions. And it just kind of makes itself. You just pick it at the right time. We did cold stainless steel ferment this, like you would most any rosé. But like Mike's wines, Ancient Oaks wines are also all wild fermentation as well.
Well, I think it
was easy to make.
You said the wine made itself. I had no idea wine was even capable, but that's amazing. I want to jump into this the red Pinot, and I will delineate between the two. This is coming from Siebert Ranch, which is where you are right now. Siebert Ranch as a place, what's it like?
Well, it is elevated. It looks out over just north of Santa Rosa. It looks out over the Santa Rosa Plains. And
I'll tell you what, Greg, I'm going to pull up some photos so people can see it, because it's beautiful. Keep talking.
Yeah, it's got a great view. We have great sunsets here. And Ken's family has farmed this continuously for a lot of years. But he decided to plant grapes in here before Pinot Noir was really very fashionable. So you can see how it kind of looks out.
Yeah.
Over
wow.
things. We do tend to pick this at the end of August these days. So it does get that afternoon warmth from the sun hitting it directly. And the elevation really helps out, I think, as well. It drains evenly, the weather pattern, and it's just a very even ripening place. Even though Sonoma County has more soil types than all of France. And for the Eastern Hills, we probably have more soil types than anywhere else in the Russian River, which also adds to our diversity.
Yeah. Are we, in this picture here, are we looking just at a different angle of the estate?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Melissa, can you take a look at this?
That's not ours, okay.
Yeah, that's not Ancient Oak. That's Ancient Oak, though. Yeah.
There we go.
Yep. You can see that the elevation up there, it actually gets a little bit steep from up on high, and then drops down. So it's quite beautiful views from up there. We're north of the city and south of Windsor, so we still have a pretty good view of other vineyards expanding out onto the horizon and into Middle Reach.
Sorry, I'll stop my screen share. It's beautiful. I mean, I've actually never been over there myself, but really breathtaking. Those sort of sweeping hills that you were talking about are, I think, one of the things that just sort of struck me when I first saw it. A wine with depth and a wine with character, which is often not an easy thing to do. So, a lot of intensity here, but also a lot of florality and a certain weightlessness to it. How would you sort of ascribe Eastern Hills to this glass?
Eastern Hills does tend to have a little bit more weight. It's also, the color tends to be a little bit darker because there is a lot of ripeness that occurs here. It's easy to let alcohols run away here. So you have to be a lot more mindful about picking at the right time rather than just letting it hang for a few extra days. But once again, it's the vines, the place, and it's the people, just like wine made anywhere. Ken and Melissa are wonderful folks to work with. They're great parents. So I really enjoy working with them and making wines like this. And Ken is a really spectacular, intuitive farmer.
The wine, it just jumps out of the glass right now. I mean, I don't even like need to get that close to it, but it's so expressive. I can't wait. I'm curious, because I was going to say, I can't wait for this to age a little bit. I do have another bottle. A wine that can age. I mean, I assume you've had some oldies, right?
Yeah, I would say right now my favorite is probably the 14, which still has a long way to go, but is really, really expressive. So it's just great working with the people and all the people of the Russian. I work in all the things, and one of our great strengths across Russian River Valley is we all work with each other. We're all very collegial, and we all support each other. And hopefully our wines express this as well. We all allow each other to do what we do.
You're so right. I don't think we talk about the people enough, but one of the things I loved moving out to California, that I know Napa, and I know the same is true in Sonoma, maybe to even a grander extent, is the amount of camaraderie and the spirit of community that exists there. There's no secrets. There's no, this is mine, this is yours. There is just sort of this sense of community. I want to jump over to your wine, Mike. I've got the 17 in my glass. I know you're drinking the 18.
Yeah.
17. So was this a wine that, not that we need to get into it, but fires in 17, was this something that you had a little trouble with on the picking side of things?
Not for us in 17. We had most of our stuff in it during when that happened. 18, 19 obviously were the ones that we were more impacted by. But 19 was especially tough, and then 20 as well. Yes, but
sorry, I didn't mean to get us off on a bad topic.
We're learning, I mean. Greg was talking about how important pick dates are, and they're becoming even more important because of that. We're not only looking at weather patterns, but we're looking at fire chances now too. So, I
have to pause just real quick because I just put this 18 in my nose, and they are remarkably, unbelievably similar to the ancient oak Pinot. That's cool. Is crazy.
Yeah, that's cool. Craig and I hang out, we talk shop a lot.
That it's sort of a savory flower. I don't really know exactly how to describe it beyond that right now, but wow. And I think, just tasting the 17, that intensity remains, but I'm sorry, go back, but I could not, my mind is blown right now.
No, that's cool. I'm glad to see it had an impact. Just to tag along with what Greg said, I've been working, the assistant winemaker that I work with right now, I've been working with him for, we just did our 25th harvest together. And I really think that has a huge hand in representing what goes into the glass, is the consistency, not only in the way it's handled and, the general vibe of the place, what music is being played. I truly believe all that has its thing going on. So when we're making something every single harvest, we have discussions on the fly as we're going back and forth, and those discussions are essentially decisions that we're making, that is super fun when you're working with somebody that you enjoy working with. So hats off to the people, again. But again, like Greg said, we're just trying to showcase what the estate can show. I mean, Christopher Creek is a little place. Like I mentioned, it's just over 11 acres, just under 12 acres. We do just two of us making the wines, and a chunk of them come from the Russian River Valley, and some come from outside of there too. So we get to play with a bunch of different stuff. But for the neighborhood series, the estate is broken down into 2 blocks, and we treat one, farm one for rosé and farm the other for our estate program. It tends to get picked. I think it's the third typically the first, second, or third block that comes in every year. For rosé, for sure, it's the first. And then it depends on whether or not the Viognier from just down the road beats it in or not. But it's just a few days later for this. It's a special spot. We could go on and on about it because it really is each one of these little spots, and everybody's got their estate, and it's so neat to taste these and see the similarities, but it's also really neat to taste the differences and talk about those differences and see, oh, Greg did some of the same things and he picked right around the same time as me, and then boom, you're like, wow, this is just off the East Side Road and it tastes totally different, even though it's getting a lot of the same afternoon sun and same 115 clone or whatever the case might be. It's neat. Each little spot has its own little stamp, it's nice to start to recognize those over and over and over again. And whether it's your wine or your buddy's wine or somebody you've never met's wine, whatever. Yeah. It's why I'm in wine.
Well, I think it's true, right? Like we all are in the wine industry because we love to taste stories and things that have a sense of place, and no greater expression than Pinot Noir and something as small as a single vineyard like you're both working with here, and just working with Russian River in general. As far as this particular wine, still a deepness, still an intensity, but these crazy florals, these aromatics that are coming out of this 18 are just insane, in the way that the Ancient Oak was as well. How do you, is it a picking decision? I mean, you're talking about wines that have a muscularity to them, but also have like a sort of ethereal quality. How do you manage it? Is it a picking decision to make sure that, because I think the idea, the notion of Russian River, at least among the sommelier community, is that the wines of Russian River have an intensity to them in general. I mean, I think people gravitate towards them because they have a lot of texture and a lot of depth. But how do you manage that as a winemaker? Because Pinot Noir is a thin-skinned grape that produces a light-bodied wine. How does one manage that in a region, as a sub-region or a neighborhood like Eastern Hills?
Well, I'll hop in and say, for me, it's experience-based tasting. We taste everything twice a day. We get right when we get in the day, we taste everything, all the grape samples, all the fermenting wines. And then the very last thing we do before we clean anything is taste it again to make sure we don't need to press something. So for us, as far as, making the wines is concerned, but sort of to add on to that, I mean, it's we've heard it so many different ways, but great wines start in the vineyard and all that sort of stuff. And so all the care that goes into the wines, vineyard crews working long, hot days and being out there and making sure that, things look and are behaving the way they're supposed to. I think a lot of times it gets lost that wine is agriculture, because it can be sort of, wow, this building is beautiful, look at this place, blah, blah. but it really is, it's agriculture, and there's a lot of hard work and discipline that goes into keeping things looking right and making sure that they're behaving well, and some prophylactic things as well. We don't use a lot of water, but these last 3 or 4 years, there's been so many heat storms that come through that we're like, okay, we've been prophylactically adding water, like before things get hot, because I like to sort of say that, vines are like humans. It's like, if we're thirsty, they're probably thirsty too. So we're going to make sure that, they have everything they need so that when we get it, we can get, then we can fine tune it. You take it from the bass and treble, but now we've got the full equalizer. Let's start doing it.
You mentioned music. Are you a music guy? Are you somebody that like listens to music all the time when you're making wine?
Me?
Yeah.
I play drums and guitar and yeah. I mean, I think Greg and I are going to start a band, right, Greg?
Yeah. We're going to call it the Lactones.
Nice.
I love the wine humor. If this is a sort of geeky, nerdy question, but and also cliche, but if Eastern Hills were an instrument or even a genre of music within Russian River Valley, what do you think it would be?
Dude.
Maybe we should ask this of all of our winemakers. This will maybe help to give us a little soundbite for each of these
bagpipes.
series.
Eastern Hills bagpipes.
You know, I should have set you up for that, Greg, because I did recently learn on our pre-call that you are a bagpipe player. I had no idea. Among many other talents.
Well, bagpipes, they stand out. You can hear them from a ways off. They have a lot of intensity to them. And so, yeah, Eastern Hills is bagpipes.
Okay, I'll take it. I think that's accurate. Mike, do you second?
I'm going to second that. Yeah, because, you know, obviously I could be like, oh, drum. But no, I think he nailed it.
Bagpipes. I smell bagpipes. I think that's accurate. I like it. I think that also like kind of gives us all a little sense of like what we're talking about. You know, we've talked about an intensity to this wine, you know, a depth to this wine. As it relates to some of the other neighborhoods, are there things that you think of, not when it comes to the soil and the place, but in the glass? Are there things that you think of when you think of Eastern Hills as compared to maybe the rest of Russian River?
Intensity, but I think that this is another good reason why everyone should be tasting all the different neighborhoods of the Russian River, because we all are one, but we all are different. Just like in neighborhoods in San Francisco or New York, you know, there, as you said, there's no dividing line, but you move from one to another. You appreciate them all for what they are, and I think everyone should explore all of the neighborhoods to really develop their own sense of what the flavor of that particular neighborhood's like. Yeah,
the West Village and Upper East Side are two very different places, but we're all part of New York.
Yeah, totally.
And Soho.
Soho, I can't like put my finger on Soho these days. I lived in New York before I moved to Napa, and that was always a weird area. It just was kind of like a hodgepodge of different things. I couldn't figure it out.
I mentioned it.
Well, I think we've sort of identified to some degree, and I don't know, Mike, if you want to chime in there with any other any characteristics that you find specific about Eastern Hills before we go.
No, I think intensity. I think in some cases weight, maybe a little heavier mouthfeel, just because of the
ripeness.
Just because it gets ripe, and sometimes you're despite your best efforts, you're like, oh, you got in there, and you're like, oh boy, that's a half point higher than I thought it was going to be. Wow.
Yeah.
So you know, I think those are the things that I see in tasting our stuff, our neighbors' stuff. It's representative of the Eastern Hills, and it gets warm there. Yeah.
It does get warm. We have learned so much. I've learned so much. I can't wait to explore the other 5 neighborhoods of Russian River Valley. I think one thing to note, because, you know, we're not talking about something like an AVA that's printed on the labels. So, it's a little bit more challenging for people, consumers in particular, to figure out, how for them to know, whether a wine is from a particular neighborhood. But I encourage you, if you're curious about this, to go visit the Russian River Valley wine growers, and they have that map that I pulled up earlier. You can see that, and then they also list all of some of the wineries that come from each of those particular neighborhoods. So that's one way. You could also just continue watching this series and learn more and discover more producers and wines. But guys, thank you so much for being with me today. I really, really appreciate all of your knowledge and your insight. We've tasted very delicious wines. The first being from, let me pull the bottle up so people know, and I'll put this all in the notes. The first being the Ancient Oak Cellars from Siebert Ranch, 2017 vineyard from Russian River Valley, Eastern Hills, and then also the that gorgeous rosé, which I am very excited there's another bottle of, because that was delicious. And then the 2018 and the 17 Christopher Creek Estate Pinot Noir from our friend Mike Brunson there. So thank you guys so much. I will send you on your way. I know you're very busy. It's like pruning and vineyard time stuff. And I think you're losing daylight. So I will say goodbye to you. Goodbye to you all. If you guys have questions, please leave them in the comments. And if you're enjoying this, we'd really appreciate your support and letting us know that this has been fun and you want more of it. So see y'all soon, and cheers, guys.
Hey, thanks, you guys. See you, Greg. See you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Hey, bye, Mike.